First of all, I want to say thanks to Adriana and Marcel. I know Marcel Adriana for a long time for two reasons. First reason that Adriana won the Roman Prize in the American Academy more than 10 years ago. And Marcel won the same prize last year. So they spent more than 2 years in Roma as a Roman Prize. They get this important prize that is... Ciao Luca!
Luca, sì, Luca, lui, anche Luca. Ciao, dai.
So the important issue is that okay, I will translate for them in Italian, that is better. Allora, Marcel e Adriana li ho conosciuti molti anni fa perché sono venuti Adriana ha vinto il Roman Prize 10 anni fa, mentre Marcello ha vinto lo scorso anno. Sono due, hanno uno studio di architettura a Tijuana ed è la cosa molto interessante che vivono proprio su un confine tra due nazioni. Addirittura la loro casa, uno dei muri della loro casa è il confine con gli Stati Uniti.
Lo faccio vedere.
Sì, faglielo vedere.
È lì.
Ecco, vedete? Quello è il confine tra il Messico e gli Stati Uniti ed è il muro della loro casa, quindi è anche interessante, non sono architetti di confine, ma vivono proprio uno dei muri è il confine con gli Stati Uniti. E sapete, Tijuana è una città del Messico, è la prima città che si incontra dall'altra parte del confine del Messico in California, dopo San Diego. Marcel e Adriana quindi hanno insegnato per molti anni negli Stati Uniti e continuano a insegnare. Marcel è professore a Berkeley. Tu, Adriana, stai insegnando ora anche tu a Berkeley oppure insegni?
Il prossimo...
Anche insegno a Berkeley, però sono stata insegnando all'University of San Diego.
Tu per tanti anni, mentre Marcel insegnava al Hoover College, Adriana insegnava all'Università di San Diego. Quindi una condizione di questa del limite che ritroviamo spesso nel loro lavoro. Hanno vinto appunto oltre al Roman Prize, ma hanno vinto anche tanti premi di architettura. Il PA Architectural Award è stato forse il più importante per il primo edificio che avete realizzato. Spero che oggi ce lo fate vedere, quel piccolo edificio a Tijuana, che è un edificio molto bello. Hanno realizzato e stanno realizzando diversi edifici di social housing, quindi è interessante proprio in questa condizione di confine, no? Di vivere su un confine. È anche interessante vivere tra due culture, perché appunto con uno sguardo insegnare nelle ricche università americane, ma dall'altra parte lavorare con un impegno civile da architetti anche con molti progetti di architettura, non solo concorsi, ma anche progetti in fase di realizzazione di architettura sociale a Tijuana. Sapete che Tijuana è una città abbastanza difficile, no? Perché è una città che per un lungo periodo ha attraversato un momento, come tante città del Messico, come tante città di confine, no? Ha avuto dei periodi anche molto difficili da un punto di vista di viverla la città, no? Una città molto violenta è stata anzi adesso la situazione è più calma rispetto a qualche anno fa, se non sbaglio, no?
Sì, più, un po'.
Un po' sì, però non va mai. Non va mai via.
Quindi, insomma, è una situazione interessante. Avere uno studio di architettura in un posto del genere e quindi fare ricerca nell'università, ma nello stesso tempo riuscire a applicare poi questa ricerca nei progetti di social housing e anche con l'esperimentazione sulla costruzione, sui sistemi parametrici, sul design parametrico e quindi sul sistema costruttivo degli edifici, secondo me è una ricerca estremamente interessante e quindi penso che sentiremo ancora parlare di più di loro nei prossimi anni. Sono molto contento di ospitarli oggi qui, sperando poi di averli presto dal vivo ad Ascoli. Loro ogni anno facevano una cosa molto bella, questo mi sa che è il primo anno che non la fate, portavano gli studenti americani, non solo studenti americani, per 2 mesi a Roma a studiare e facendo un corso di architettura estivo a Roma, quindi hanno una conoscenza anche e un amore, possiamo dire, verso l'architettura italiana e verso la città di Roma, un amore molto particolare, tanto da essersi sposati in Italia e a Roma. Quindi, è bello avere appunto degli architetti che hanno un grande amore per il nostro paese. E se venite, veniamo ad Ascoli, vedete che vi innamorerete, come vi siete innamorati di Roma, vi innamorerete anche di Ascoli, perché è una città meravigliosa. Quindi lascio la parola a Marcel e Adriana, che possono iniziare condividendo lo schermo, possiamo iniziare la vostra conferenza. Vi ringrazio tanto. E dico agli studenti che sto prendendo le presenze, basta che scrivete in chat che siete presenti, sia per chi fa i crediti formativi, sia per gli studenti della professoressa Menzietti.
Grazie Luca,
Grazie Luca,
per l'introduzione, perfetto.
I will not, I understand a lot of Italian. I understood almost all of it, of course, from what Luca said, and thank you. I wish I could be more fluent in doing it in Italian. I think Adriana can do it, but I don't know if I can do it. But I would really thank you, Luca, for inviting us. It's really great to see you and have this opportunity and be with you guys. I think it's always for us. It's always very, very important to be with students and to share. And we as faculty, as academics, also we know that how to get that idea of getting exposed and having students get exposed is very important. And hopefully, me talking in English is not a big problem. If not, please let them know, and I can try 2 words or 3 words, and then I can do it a little more.
No. I will be solidarity for Marcel. I'll do it in English. No, but I was also super excited. Forse questa parte lo posso dire in italiano, che soprattutto grazie Luca, perché per me personalmente è molto bello fare questa presentazione. Tanti anni, più da 20 anni, sono stata ad Ascoli come studentessa di Cristiano Toraldo.
È vero, perché tu sei stata anche con Cristiano.
Sì, e quindi ho delle bellissimi ricordi anche, e sarebbe bellissimo una volta tornare, no? Dopo tutto questo.
Sarà fatto.
Sì, il prossimo anno magari, dai. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen over here, and let me try this. Yes, you can see it.
Yeah.
Let me try and see if it moves. Do you see the other screen?
Yes.
Okay. Just let me know whenever the screen doesn't move, because I've been seeing lately in Zoom meetings and sharing these platforms, sometimes the screen doesn't move. So let me know, because suddenly we feel that we're moving along in the screen and something like that. Okay, so we will start by framing our practice a little bit, and by how some elements have influenced our approach in architecture. We'll start to kind of see, like what you were explaining, Luca, explaining a little bit our context and the factors that we think that have influenced our practice, and how we use those things in order to kind of understanding how to approach our projects, right, in a way. But as also sense a way of how we would like to kind of see the way we work and the way we do architecture frames the way we construct this in this region. So so evidently the border, as I show you right now, as I showed you a few minutes ago, is a big influence in our work. The physicality of this element has been a constant reminder of inequality, of how the inequality is in this context. But at the same time, growing up so close, like you see, to certain points as a background of daily life. I grew up, this is the This is the first neighborhood, the northest point in Mexico. This is we will say that this is the first neighborhood in Mexico that coincides with the United States. So I grew up in this neighborhood, living every day this situation of the border and the condition of the border. So it also frames a sense of to overcome obstacles and see this region as an opportunistic landscape, territory that could be characterized by use of conflict to create advantage. So also slums, right? The rapid urbanization and constant pressure of the dynamics of border cities, the slums, these kind of irregular settlements you see in the bottom. So what you see is my house, this house where we live, and how we got it at the beginning, how we transformed when we had the kids, is the border that it changed in 2018, and they did it in 3 hours, 4 hours. They changed this wall in 4 hours. And so you just go close to the border there, and of course there's going to be a police, right, coming from the United States as soon as you get closer to the border. And so in the bottom, we're seeing this rapid urbanization at the periphery that is this kind of housing, the necessity of housing, and kind of consuming the periphery of many cities in Latin America, and Tijuana is no exception. So Tijuana, a lot of people migrating, trying to cross the border. So we have a lot of population trying to cross, and they stay here. But they sell this idea of how even this really small house becomes like a castle. It becomes this kind of notion that is you can have this somewhat paradise of what is US, but in reality is this, right? This is the many realities that people have, the majority of the population. So these illusions, these images, these imaginary conditions become as part of the play of what architecture is part of, in many sense.
Yeah, so another thing of Tijuana is that Tijuana is a city in constant construction and erasure at the same time. There's no sense of history or memory, or there is, but there are no institutions to protect it. Usually what happens is it has been the conglomeration of international market trades. One of the biggest ones has been the maquiladora. And now it continues to be maquiladora, but there are other industries like medical tourism that is starting to happen, and other types of markets like the call center that Luca, you look at our studio, that are starting to emerge, and they oftentimes erase parts of the city, and other things get rebuilt, even though they are formal constructions. It sort of follows the same kind of informality that we see in the informal settlements.
So this rapid growth, right, where we're talking about this selling of illusions, that we're talking about how this space of how we are selling these cities as an illusion of structures and region is becoming a sense of questioning in our practice, saying how to work, where, with whom you're working with, and has it been very important to develop this relationship? What are the factions, the people you're working with? How do you collaborate with this series of groups that are important from the US side, from the Mexican side, and how we need to kind of coordinate these forms of working? So we are very a small practice that believes in collaboration then, right? It's fundamental to talk about how we collaborate with different people. We look for the expertise and opportunity that these collaborations can bring, while still have present what could architecture role be in the current challenge of our environment. So collaboration, the idea of CRO, Collaborative Research Office, is about the platform that we think essential of collaborating. So many of the projects are sustainable revitalizations of neighborhoods, emergent growth on urban peripheries, resurgence of civic space, the migrant populations, right, it's very important, and the impact of industry in material technology. So these are the range of projects that we work, and we'll try to show you an example of those ones. We will present 10 projects that structure around the type of client.
Yeah, so these we're presenting a series of projects that represent the type of clients that we've been working with, which is the government or nonprofit organizations. Also, we work for the Archbishop of Tijuana and the private sector. And as well, we will present briefly our research in Rome and how Rome in Italy has been as well part of our influence in even how to operate in this region. So we can.
So the way has been a reference, a comparison.
Always a reference for us in operating in this border condition.
So we'll start with the first project, which is this is in El Florido as a mixed use. It's at the outskirts of Tijuana, and this is interesting. This project was interesting how it came to us. We did not look for it. We didn't look for this project. And this is very common situation that we always look for the type of projects, not that the projects come to us. So which is what's strange for us, as we don't wait for the projects. We're usually are formulating the projects. We're seeing how we can make it happen. So a woman walks into the architectural school that I was teaching in San Diego and asks for us to build this project in the periphery of Tijuana.
So one of the first questions that of these projects was how to approach and reconsider the corner strip. This was a little shopping mall at the corner in Tijuana, which is very common that you leave it completely open for cars to park, and then the shops are stepped in the back. So it was important to define the corner as this with the wall, the boundary of the building to re-articulate the street and construct the urban life.
But it was interesting also because at the end, this client who comes and says, "Oh yeah, you want you to design this corner strip," and usually right there, like typically they are in the commercial area and the parking just in front. So we tried to kind of interlock. But what became more interesting is saying, okay, the first level is commercial, the second level is a restaurant, and you have these people who are kind of with big bands and music, and you imagine this Mexican population, right? It's like saying, okay, let's have music. But suddenly in one meeting, she says, well, no, we want a strip club where pole dancing where you have prostitution in the third level. So you have prostitution, this thing. So you have a prostitution kind of bordel, right? And in the third level, then you have a restaurant, and you have a commercial area. And this is the reality, because then in the outskirts, people have their own kind of mixer, kind of in central kind of mixing of these programs and lives that they construct. But of course, at the moment when we're working with the client, suddenly it started to become rapidly started to become a bit about security, because the husband was in jail because he was a drug trafficker. And then suddenly we say, how do we work with this project? And suddenly the building needed to be protected, and that we didn't want to work with her anymore. But at the end, we needed to finish it. So it becomes a very conflicting relationship of how to have this client, right? So, well, anyways, at the end, in architectural terms, the skin of the wall is used as a medium to undertake this. So protection. But we also thought it had to take into consideration the buildings in the area have no maintenance. So the wall became this idea of drift, of dust, becoming a second skin, a rain screen facade, a controlling climate while taking advantage of the time, using dust and the accumulation of it as a design opportunity, and moving how the movement of the sun as a good way to play with the effect of death, the effect of how this dust gets celebrated as a registration of time. So through the design, we designed this idea of 3 modules, these modules that are concrete, and they become this security blanket, also as a collection of dust, and then creates this effect to the whole facade. So we started testing different materials. We were starting aluminum, concrete, and some wood elements. And of course, they became the most practical term to use this concrete. So we use, of course, the technology and so on and so on. But the technology is never the main aspect of driver of the project, and we use the technology to understand the moment of construction, how to expedite things. So in this case, we use the concrete at the end, and here you see the prototype. Yeah, so here we have another prototype, like a sample on the concrete. But we use concrete, right, to do that. Sorry, let me. So as you saw, right, this is the effect of how the wall gets transformed and how dust gets accumulated. And here we see the idea of how the decay in the way that the registration in time becomes part of it. So of course you can see this is, I will say that it's a project totally influenced to what we saw in Italy, how the idea of these walls that have very kind of luminous be part of the aesthetics of the building. So now we're gonna show talk about the project that Luca was talking about. This project is Casa de las Ideas.
Yeah, so Casa de las Ideas Modulo Prep was designed for the federal government. Sede Sol is called, the Social Development Agency in the nation. This was a very ambitious project that we were very lucky to collaborate. They were using urban infrastructure and civic spaces as a way to transform the culture and the highest crime areas of cities. And it was following the same model as in Colombia, in particular Medellin, that a few years had great success. And it was the first time that it was happening here in Tijuana. So they asked us to work to develop a small library, 200 square meters library, digital at the time, and they asked us to do it in 1 month for construction documents. That usually is the case when you're working for the government, that it takes a long time to gestate projects, but then for the production, it has to go really quickly in order to get the money. And so this is it was, and it still is one of the biggest crime areas of in the city of Tijuana. Not anymore. The crime, because of this intervention, has moved towards the outskirts, but it still continues. And it's a very interesting place. This was a river, a creek that was full of, as you can see, trash but at the same time it's used for transportation. So it's a really dynamic river in the city, right in the heart of an informal settlement. So we had many challenges, but quite interesting in terms of the social fabric.
Yeah. So usually what happens is that it's a very topographical sites, right? Tijuana has a very strong topography, and usually the river, the stream where the water comes in, it becomes the only place where people are using as a movement, and becomes the depository. So it becomes an infrastructure of movement, but also the depository of all junk and all trash. So it becomes a conflict because it is a point of infections and problems, but also the only way to access in getting into the city or getting into these neighborhoods that are really remote. So one aspect our project that tried to rethink is also, right, that we needed to kind of do something about it. Of course, the concrete is being already a concrete channel, so there's flooding. Whenever it has a problem, it gets flooded, and we needed to find a way that stitches the two sides of the river watershed, or that channelized element. So the center, we needed to kind of create a bridge that the building also works or functions as a bridge. But at the initial part of it, the idea of the library, it was not a library in that sense. They wanted to just make it into kind of a community center, and we say, well, let's change it more into a community library element that becomes access to information. One of the most important things is how people get access to information. So we talk about this digital library. So it becomes a space beyond also the information sequencing interior and exterior stages. So few things that we needed to consider, the main practical elements that we needed to kind of consider is that, of course, we're going to have computers, and you're in a very high crime area, so we needed to protect, but at the same time connect. So in this case, usually, right, people want to do, when they're built, they create a fence. And we didn't want to have that. So you can touch the building, you can go proximity to the building, but we needed to control the access of it and create a security for the building. But also that the building, the things can happen on all around it. So there was an amphitheater that was going to be proposed by like 200, 300 meters from there. And we talked about it, saying how to fuse this amphitheater, tucked it into the building, and also become part of the project. So in any case, the idea is about creating these kind of entrances and stages, and so that you can see the idea is that it's very controlled access, but at the same time, how to open it up more. So you will see that. So in this case, now you see that the diagram that we're talking about, this essence, that suddenly these entrances, right, they become stages, they become platforms to talk, they become like microphones, if you can say for it, they become stages that people can talk with the leaders can talk with the people, but also becomes a seating places, they become elements where they can become like, of course, goal, right, like soccer, right? So it becomes the goalie, or becomes a space of seating. And then see this idea of bringing the library, tucking it up, it becomes a series of stages, and then bringing the other stage. So in the end, right, it's 100 and 200 square meters. It was $100,000. It's almost like, imagine that you're investing, if you impact 10 people, $10,000 each. That's already a benefit, right? If you see it in economic terms, it's already a benefit. So we had to build it in $100,000. So we say, yes, we convince them and say, yeah, 10 persons, for sure we will impact 10 persons, and they will change 10 persons. And that's already a plus. And then for sure that impacted even further than that. So
yeah, so some criticism of this at the beginning has been that the building is, how does it relate to the context? This is completely, creating difference. And yes, indeed, the building is paradoxical. But what is creating with the sharp edges and the contrast with the informality, with something extremely formal, and I would say formal in the sense that it articulates space, it defines space. It has created a point of reference in the community, a piece of infrastructure in a way that the community then starts to identify.
So it's white, right? But the idea it was very important to understand that the white was not an enamorment of material. We thought, yes, it is in a situation of a space that is going to be a high crime, and people are going to graffiti on it, they're going to do stuff to it. So the white becomes more as a canvas. It becomes as a setback, right? And a setback to informality, to things to happen, but also that people, they're going to kind of paint on it.
So there's a participation. How does the building, participates with the community? And I think that's the bigger question, as opposed to how it looks. So here is one of the sides. So as well, another important thing is that the building is all passive system. It was very low budget. There are no solar systems or anything, but it's quite cool that it has a cross ventilation, and the height of it, that even though it's not enormous, but compared to what is there, it creates shade. It gets super hot, especially in the canyons of Tijuana. It gets very, very hot. So with the staircases, it provides places where you can actually take a bus and sit. A lot of kids that go to school, they live in the higher parts of the hill, so they're using the canal as a corridor for transportation, and they can come here, sit and play, and then continue.
So these steps that you see here, and the trees are a little bit longer, bigger. Sorry. The kids, you can see the kids. They were coming from the very low part of the river, and then walk, and then they sit here, and then they take a rest, they take a little bit of shade, and then move on. So this space, these stairs, they became very important in the sense of how to kind of create this kind of relationship with the context. And then
another thing are the trees. They have grown a lot, and they have their jacarandas and another tree that has pink flowers. So right now it's all painted with purple and pink from in the spring, and it's quite it's great to see that.
Okay. So and like I was saying, so the white becomes this setback, and but yes, it's still, we were thinking that people were going to graffiti. We were wrong. We were thinking that people were going to just vandalize it and have graffiti, murals, and stuff like that. But that hasn't not happened. So it's interesting that that people are still preserving. So what happened, right? So while we were almost finishing construction, the library gets hijacked, and it gets hijacked because there was a change in government, and the change of government says, okay, it's not anymore a library, it's going to be building is for how to kind of go and interact with people, but it's the headquarters of a political party of the community. So at the end, what happens is that people reunited, and this is what happens. So what? So what he's saying is that there has been a lot of work. We were working for many years because this is a project that was generated by the people, and just a change of government and takes over is not fair. Is the only she's saying that the only heritage, or the only thing that they can really give us, is the knowledge and the access to the information. So it worked out in many ways. People really accepted the building. They protested for 3 days. The building came back to the community. The community is the one in charge of the building with a nonprofit organization. And they're working together, having a series of events. So still the computers and the access to information happens. They have community events in there. They have these radio stations where they were talking about.
Yeah, so one of the best things that happened is that this became part of a nonprofit organization, so no longer by the government. And they have been able to inject programs and money and activities. You can see here how the building is you have theater in the weekends, and even movie nights. So it's quite, you see how the building starts to really participate in becoming alive, even though the project was not 100% completed, but it had the structure, it had the bones to get it started. And I think something that to keep in mind, and something that we learned, is that we as designers, we're just a small percentage of the impact and carrying these projects through, because without the support of the nonprofit organization and how they're imagining to use this and continue imagining the life of this place, I mean, the architecture would become a ruin.
The architecture is just a platform, right? There, you need to really Tico Orozco, the community, all the other people who are working with this. So anyways, they have a series of activities in night and the day, and it's working there. So here I will show you a little bit of a film just to kind of get a little bit of a sense of how it feels. Anyways, so now we wish they do paint it and do stuff to it, but they don't want to. So there's like, okay, no, it's why we want to preserve it like that. So anyways, that's
every like 2 years they bring the community and they paint it white again. So it's quite interesting.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about another project that we work with the government, not the same one. This is the National Public Health Service, and we developed a series of modules throughout Baja California for clinical assistance. So in recent years, the agency, the health department, right, has been lagging behind the capacity of attention to the public. And this surpassing the capacity of its facilities, becoming even more acute in irregular settlements. So they needed to find how to reach to these very, very far communities all throughout the state of Baja California to create a module, to create a clinic so they can service these communities. So, of course, like many other projects, their government has to be very quick. We had a $5,000 budget. We needed to do it in 1 week. And so we needed to build it in 1.5 weeks. So, of course, we worked and they said, well, what are the things like many other projects they are doing with containers? Of course, we did it with containers because that's where it's very easily accessible by the maquiladoras. And we just worked with 3 modules and then say we can build it in $5,000 if we can quickly be developed. We can create 32 modules later on and deploy it throughout Baja California to the most remote areas in Baja California to have healthcare in clinics, which is interesting in many ways because now these type of things that with the situation with the coronavirus and all these things, the problems going along, these modules are crucial to give service, and hopefully these modules are very important in how they are functioning right now. So anyways, the idea is a very simple idea, that these 3 modules, you have moments where registering people get clinical tests, the medical kind of doctor. So it's a very simple and a way that becoming a way to create the 3rd module as a ventilation, as a way to kind of create a better kind of environment to the space of climate condition. And this is the module. So it was built, right, very quickly in $5,000. And the only thing that we did in reality to the many things is paint in many characteristics. So the painting, sometimes what we're talking about is sometimes the most essential things is like just paint can create a change or an ambience to it, or even just the reconfiguration of a pre-existing element and how to kind of rethink it. It creates something of a staging. So sometimes architecture is just in those terms and to identify these conditions. So here you see.
Yeah, so this is how, this was the module that was built outside of a hospital that right now is being used for COVID. So you see how the paint is breaking, and that creates a datum in a way to break the scale. So even how the building can come close to a tree and create seating, it creates that space as outside. So there's a relationship to context, even though this is a prototype that is generic, completely cannot be applied anywhere. But it has those possibilities of how it can connect to the surroundings.
So here you see another. So these ones are the ideas that all deployed throughout Baja California 32 to the most remote areas where people don't have access.
And I say a sad story there is that when the government changed and they, propaganda, they came and painted
with the political
party's colors.
Yeah. So anyways, now we are going to go and talk about a project. These are small houses in Playa Tijuana, very close to where we live. And these are houses that respond to the conditions of the border, also that situation of what's happening. So this is.
You want to?
This. Go ahead.
So what this project responds is that on the housing situation of the border, where in San Diego you have smart growth and the control of inner development, it has created housing to concentrate now in the inner city. But of course, with single family residents, the construction and the cost for living has become really, really high. And in Tijuana, on the contrary, in Tijuana, there's a lot of speculation of the land. People are keeping the land outside for building, for future building, and so it's not really constructing an urbanism for the city.
So what we're seeing is that in San Diego, the San Diego, the speculation of land, the constraints of having a green belt to contain the city has skyrocketed the price of housing. For instance, you can rent a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom for $2,300 or $3,000 an apartment. So imagine that is a $3,000 for an apartment, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, where people who work in a supermarket with families or people who cannot live anymore in 1-bedroom or 2 bedrooms, they don't have the space. So of course they go to Tijuana, and they go to Tijuana because it's more affordable. You can rent a house for $300 and you can have your family. The other way around also, that people from the US, because of affordability, they go to Tijuana for affordable housing. So they can have, they're being displaced, they're being forced economically to live in Tijuana because that's more affordable. So that has become a strain in Tijuana, has become very difficult because income has been provided through the border market to an increasing group of families that see Tijuana as an opportunity, in a way creating an upscale to what they have in San Diego by filtering, but it's a filtering process from San Diego to Tijuana. But what happens in Tijuana residents that when they cannot compete also with people who come, who can pay $500, $600, so there's a trickling down of socioeconomic things. So they cannot compete to the dollar, so the downscale, the middle class goes to the low, and how low then goes into inner slums and squatters. So there's a reversal of this impact in housing. And of course, that has happened also that the people who were building social housing in 2008, they go bankrupt. So there's a big void of housing. So anyways, we tried to address a little bit about how not anymore creating these vast projects of housing at the outskirts, how to densify the typical lot of 2 houses, how to create a very slender project of 4 meters, and then also creating a very flexible way to kind of mitigate this population. So you have, like I said, 4 meters wide, you have the 1-bedroom and another 2 bedrooms. So here's a section. And this section becomes important because the idea of how to create something that was flexible in many ways. So here, what you have is, it could be a 3-bedroom house, like 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and then you have the living room and then the kitchen, but also can be converted into a 1-bedroom house for an apartment, a studio, and another studio. And this becomes also important because many people then can find a way to sublet, to rent these things, because when families come also, then the children grow and they need to create another source of income. So we needed to find a way that the housing becomes another source of income into this element. So here you see, we needed to compete with what was built in Infonavit. It was $300 per square meter, right? The cost of construction. So very, very cheap. It had to be built and very simple. But from the other side, it opens up, right, as much as possible to gain the idea of accessibility and connecting as much as we can to the backside. So here, this is now how it's inhabited. And here's a very interesting kind of scenario where you see she is a chef, a person who cooks in the United States and works in the United States, but lives with her parents. So this is the living room and the kitchen is a common area, and then the parents live in the 2nd floor, and she has her own apartment on the 3rd floor. So here it works in this scenario how to construct these layer densities, but work in the socioeconomic strata to have affordability for people in this realm. So here's another project. Now the 2 projects that we're talking about that is even more more talking about social housing. This is the part of the bottom of the economic strata.
Yeah, so these are two projects that were created for Infonavit, which are the it's called Fondo, how do you say?
The national
funding for housing,
social housing.
For social housing in Mexico. In the 80s in Mexico, as it was true in many other countries, is the developers were constructing what you quote unquote social housing, and they were putting on stock, and it was very low income housing with no infrastructure at the outskirts and the periphery of the city that was pretty much destroying the urban farming, not constructing a city at all. And this lasted for about 20 years, and Tijuana was one of the major centers where these developments happened. And so now they realize that was a big mistake, and they're trying to rethink. Now that we've created these places have been abandoned, how can we rethink? So that was for the vertical project, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then the small, it was for the rural areas that as well we have in a way kind of forgotten about the rural spaces and how to provide services there as well, while respecting the environment and the landscape. So this is a project, the first one, a prototype that happens. It was designed in the outside of Tijuana. It's called Tecate in the city.
So yeah, so the Infonavit, let me go back a little bit just to understand that recently, for many years, the Infonavit was part of it, and they get bankrupt. So there was a new interest of how to incorporate architects once again, because they were the Infonavit became just a banking institution, just like giving money to our developers, and there was no interest to really create cities. They were just creating enormous amount of construction without creating cities. So there was no idea of cities, but even less, there was an idea of the unit itself. So they invited once again architects to participate. So in this case, the Infonavit asked us to participate. We didn't know what was it, and said only that it needed to be a prototype housing for Tecate, which Tecate is, this community is like an hour from here. This is a community that the majority of the work is production of brick. They consume the land, right, and live in the land. But the consumption of this land of creating brick is for the export for the US. They export this brick to the US, to the United States. So the community in Hindu is 4,000 inhabitants located at the outskirts of Tecate. And it's mostly engaged in the production, like I was saying, of this pottery and things. And it's a marginalized community that has a more or less of 20 years. And that usually the house that they do is this type of house. So anyways.
So the use of the brick becomes, the kind of the basis of the project that we thought of developing the construction with the same material, but trying to introduce more environmentally friendly in the production. The little unit is only 46 square meter unit that has an entrance into a little patio where they can clean themselves or use it for the exhaust of they're producing bricks nearby. And then there's a series of modules of openings, either as windows or doors, that can be interchangeable for future growth of the family.
So yes,
this is an example of the patio and how the building could grow horizontally and sometimes vertically.
So with the budget, once again, right, with a very strict budget of $11,000 to build this first module, the first stage, one of the challenges was to maximize the use of the brick as a thermal comfort, because it's in a very extreme climate. And being that it was produced on site, there was an opportunity to create a double layer perimeter. And that brackets the space. The proposal looks for growth as a generation and as a possible urban fabric. So the idea of this module, right, the space of the center becomes important, because how people, they produce brick, and it's a very dirty kind of thing. And so the entrance, the transitional space, the idea of the patio becomes very important as a cleansing kind of approach, and also as a way to unite, as a way to connect the units itself. But also by standardizing these doors, the windows, and everything, is to kind of consider how the growth of this unit can go horizontally, but also vertically, like we were seeing in the image here. So how do we grow horizontally and also vertically? That this unit is very flexible in this kind of thing that we call communities. These people who work this area work as companies, and so as soon as they need more people, of course, family members come from Oaxaca and come from Chiapas, and they needed also to kind of grow and create this kind of expansion. So anyways, this project, not knowing at the end it was a sort of competition of 150 plus proposals for the Research Experiential Laboratory Infonavit, which is this kind of laboratory at the outskirts of Mexico City, where they selected, right, most architects conform of Michael Meredith and Hilary Sampler were invited to design the master plan. And then the proposal, and from these two projects, they were built in Apan, Mexico. So this becomes a laboratory that will be used as a meeting point for reflection and improve of housing financed by Infonavit. Infonavit is the financing institute. So although it's great, right, that this Infonavit is aggressively investing and very involved in generating alternative conditions that invited the architects to produce architecture, I think it would have been very nice that really all these modules were built where they were designed for. Suddenly it becomes a little bit like a showcase, like a showroom of these kind of architects. And once again, the architects, the participation, the intention of resolving, right, this kind of notion that the architects always have the solution or the things, and then suddenly they get detached, right? That's something that boggles my mind all the time. That's saying, then why we are doing this, and it would have been nice that this project is
not for the people that was supposed to be serving in the context. So yes, it's a problem.
So anyways, yes, you have all the big names here, right? You have Mauricio Rocha, Tatania Bilbao, even architect Andrew Sago, and you have it here, and then of course all this becomes this kind of collective of architects that Mexico and international, and of course we slide into that group. But anyways, I think we would have wanted to see this project there, and then it was built. And so, anyways, the essence is that we proved. I think for us it was interesting that we proved that we were able to build it
at the budget.
At the budget, but not even under budget. Under budget. So it was under budget what they were stipulated. So here the idea of this very simple condition of the patio, but trying to kind of work as efficient as we can with the materials, trying to construct this in a very efficient way, constructing these elements, the standardization of the openings, and then the interior, trying to dignify as much as we can to this space of the interior. And it's really interesting because it was published in this magazine in the summer of the collection and understanding that. And you can see, for instance, it was $11,000, the budget. And there were projects that were building it in $13,000, and even some projects $16,000 that you can see here. And then suddenly it's way out of budget. So it becomes this kind of architects becoming simulating the idea of consciousness and then in respect to the idea of what we're building. But in the reality, there were architects just building this kind of semi-idea of kind of social interaction, social responsibility, but they were just out of budget. We built it in $8,000, so we had $3,000 extra. And I think that these $3,000 extra were very interesting because they can use as a way to kind of grow the unit as you want, or become an investment of a commercial other activities. Sometimes it's not the architecture itself, but it's other incentives that need to kind of collaborate with architecture.
The landscape.
Yeah. So I think the $3,000 is something that we call it almost like micro grants. Anyways, I think that this is a moment to understand also when architects need to know or understand, they need to stop. There's no more that architects can do and need to know that it's not a solution anymore. So at the end, this is another project of the social housing.
This is the one that we were mentioning before, that in the periphery construction of the single family dwellings for low income, that completely crashed. A lot of these neighborhoods became abandoned or crime areas. I think Luca came to visit once one of those very depressing areas in Tijuana, I remember. And so right now that what is happening is that so Infonavit is constructed this document and a reflection of it, and how can we recycle these spaces? They are already built. There's some infrastructure, not a lot, but what this project basically looks at is looking at the lot that was the existing single-family lot, which was 5 meters by 25 meters, 20 meters. And how can we densify it? So this is a prototype thinking of the redensification of this particular lot proportion that could be, you know, deployed and constructing a city. What we were looking at in how to minimize the width of the tower, we also proposed the 4 units. There was an economic model. It had to be feasible, and how to provide funding, and how can families could pay the mortgage that was sustainable, an economic model. And from that we departed, no, in terms of the architecture.
But that's something that was really important in this project. It's super important. I think that it was usually you have the 2 bedrooms on the side. In simple move, we said let's put 1 bedroom in the back, 1 bedroom in the front, and the positioning of the stair. And this is only because how the front unit can be transformed as another element. So usually we have like a FAR, floor area ratio, that tabulates density, and we were incorporating these ideas of transformation area ratios and then productive area ratios, how productive space can be and how transformation can be. So these 2 factors are even considering how can they be incorporated. So in this case, the stair becomes strategically positioned in a way that this space can be transformed and then the unit can be transformed, because usually 50 or 60% of the people, they need to create another source of income because they work in some place, but they need to create another way to create income. So usually that gets transformed on the bottom. So we created these aspects of how, for instance, the stair in many levels, like for instance, in the 2nd level, they could be a little kind of tailor shop, or it could be a little kind of fondita or a little restaurant, or it can be another production element. So it depends on the necessity that suddenly they need to create. The housing is not anymore just a place of the family just staying kind of sedentary, but they need to become something economically feasible and something of production of economy. So in the bottom also the beacon transformed. So this way we position the stair to become that. And then suddenly to create this kind of like the Acapulco chair, the plastic, right? That creates this kind of a second skin, almost like a screen to kind of alleviate a little bit of the thermal kind of condition, but also it becomes a reference of saying, I live in the pink, the one has a pink, the one has a yellow. So these elements that pop out in the landscape of these more densified units, they become also as reference by the condition of color. So anyways, this is the idea of how the unit gets transformed, becomes more integrated to the economic factors that we're talking about. So now we're going to jump into scale, and this is a project that also was a very a lot of interest. It's a cancer treatment center, it's a hospital in Tijuana. And this hospital, I'm going to try to explain a little bit what is the relevance. So here you see a map of the border, and you see all the states in the border of the US. And as darker it gets, it means that less people have access to healthcare, because in the United States, it's not like Italy or in Mexico, where the accessibility to healthcare is for everybody. So as you move further, more people are being displaced or not having accessibility. But interesting enough, in Tijuana, many people in the United States come to buy medication, drugs, and everything, because it's almost like a fraction of 4 or 5 times less than what it costs in the US. And that also in the last 8 years has become important, because now many people who don't have access to healthcare, they come and get healthcare in Mexico. So now it's once again the other way around, people being displaced because the lack of accessibility from the United States. So this is a diaspora, this is a cultural diaspora, this is an exodus of population from the United States to Mexico. So this population, they need access. So that's a new emergent typology that's been coming in Tijuana, like hospitals and accessibility to healthcare. So here, what you can see in this drawing diagram, this, for instance, this whole building is just for treatment of eyes, so how to kind of treat eyes, ophthalmologists. And this building that we designed is for the cancer treatment center for cancer. The building we try to design is a new density, a new building is becoming consuming as more and more people are coming to Tijuana to get treatments. So it becomes a transformation of these buildings as we saw in the back, right? So how these buildings become denser and becoming more specialized.
Yeah, in here, where you see these towers, these are housing, but there are other towers that are currently being finished right here with that already incorporates rooms to rent where you can go and stay for periods of your treatment.
Right.
So it incorporates housing.
There's a little bit, like, I'm going to explain a little of the project. So in this case, of course, you have to kind of understand that we need to kind of comply with many of the conditions of how it was laid out, the patient, the staff flow, the ventilation, material selection, the treatment of surfaces. But most critical was designing for people and their lifestyle. So in the hospital, just how to control these kind of infections and stuff like that now that even we are living right now, well, increasing lifestyles, how to kind of address the layout of the lifestyle. So increasing distance for reducing medical errors was a big factor. Also, how the layout of the rooms could help in safer practice of medical staff, which elements can we introduce to improve social life. So distance orientation. So here we'll show key factors that we're thinking, like this unit of the room. They was saying, yes, people in the corridor, we created this little niche, right? So people can sit, and while they're walking around and recuperating, they can sit down and create kind of a street kind of way of interaction, and just not dehumanize this aspect. The other aspect is that we concentrated a locker where all the medication can be distributed in the rooms. So to reduce the problem of medications when they are centralized in the nursing station. The other factor is that all the rooms be oriented in the same direction. So people, nurses and doctors, when they come in, the flipping or the mirroring of the units, they don't produce an error of connecting to the equipment. And other factors also that we created in the unit now, that we incorporated also apartments. So family members, when they come to Tijuana, family members, they can be close. So it becomes like a hospital / hotel, right? And that being said, that there are people coming and they stay for weeks. And also we created stations so they can come more working area and also interact with it. So anyways, we were trying to incorporate this idea of lifestyles. The building is under construction right now. I don't know how right now with the conditions of the coronavirus, I think it's going to be hard to kind of see how far it continues. Hopefully it gets finished, but it has been a big problem. Anyway, so this is an emergent typology that is working right now.
So I think this is our last architectural project that we're presenting. This is a housing project that we're developing on the other side of the border in San Diego, with some friends. And what is interesting is that, as you know, in Southern California, particularly, you have the big lot and this single family house, and then a huge housing crisis right now. There's a really lack of housing. Cost for living is becoming one of the most expensive, not only in California, but in the world, in terms of square meters and price per square meter. So what we are looking is into the division of the lot. That our friend Tyler Hansen purchased this land and invited 3 architects to to each of us start the development. What this is becoming an interesting project because as well with the condition of that we are currently right now, is making us question where the future of this development, with all of the freezing of money and funding. How can this be possible in intensifying this place?
So anyway, so this project, like I said, Tyler, a friend from the MBRET who works, teaches at the Master of Real Estate Development in Architecture at the school that we were teaching, and he found these things. He found a loophole in the code, and a loophole on this property, because usually this property, like we were saying before, is a one house. So we were able to divide this house. This idea of one single family residence zoning has been a big problem in the United States. That's one of the main reasons that prices have gone skyrocket. So we were able to find this lot, in the sense of this lot, to kind of subdivide it, to kind of create a subdivision of the lot, and that's one single family. So, but the idea of this division, the idea of this kind of idea of incorporating division suddenly resonates to the conditions of borders, conditions of always segregation, and doing these things. So as we divided this element, of course, more divisions started to happen in there. So these divisions suddenly become more important, how to treat it, because as everybody started designing their own unit, like all the collection of it, suddenly we started seeing that introverted, right? Even the units to become introverted. So in the United States, privacy, the idea of privacy is super important to kind of introvert itself. So in this sense, what we try to do and separate, we said, well, we are not going to kind of prolong, we're going to push back as much as we can the unit, bring the idea of understanding the space that is in front of us as the most important, or the in between these spaces as becoming more important, in trying to kind of create a platform that is a collective idea. That even though this division is happening, we need to create a platform of collectivity. So in this case,
yeah, because that the advantage of working together with a series of other colleagues is that the site becomes porous in a way, where even though each architect is developing their own, there are those opportunities of sharing the space,
independent if they accept it or not, we created there.
Yeah.
So in essence, what was one house in converted into four houses, but in reality it's not four houses. In reality it's disguised, because each house is divided. In this house that we designed is divided because this one is a one-bedroom apartment. This is a one-bedroom apartment, and in the second level is another one-bedroom apartment in another. So the idea that the house is also disguised in a way that it can be divided into 4 units. So at the end, you have 16 units, where was one unit, was 16 units to convert that. And also what we wanted to produce is that these spaces, the in-between spaces, become opportunities of connecting sideways with the voids and people kind of interacting. And also the front part, in the saying that instead of becoming just a facade, it becomes the facade as a stage, a facade to that public idea. So creating a more collective space in the front. So here's what we started to think about, that the unit itself, the facade, the detachment of that screen, it becomes an element as a backdrop to the whole houses, because we were thinking is that at the end, like we're saying, that it becomes a backdrop to create a collective idea of this space in the front, and then becomes a staging element, and then of course a gathering of sorts.
So once again, the edges are the opportunities for that civic
the negotiating,
interaction, for constructing community, right? And as opposed to separating yourself and not in.
And this is foreign, of course, to US, right? Because they were introverted, but it might not happen. But we're saying, hey, let's position it, and then even our friends who are Americans, they were a little bit like, no, we have to be introverted, and we were saying, no, we didn't say this so much to them, and they were going to say, no, why you're doing this? No, this is so. But we were saying, here it is, and let's try it out. I think let's try it out. Let's see how that works.
And even now, I think with the COVID situation, that there is that need of community, regardless if we can be together or not. So I think it becomes even more important or interesting on how these living spaces relate to each other, even if you're not physically together, but but how do you really construct that sense of
well, anyway, so right now with the situation, we were planning to start construction in this month.
This month, yeah.
But with the situation, we didn't construct. We are now waiting a little bit. We're in the process. Hopefully, we can start construction in 2 or 3 months. So
we have building permits.
We have building permits there, so we are ready. That the obstacles of the code and everything, we have very building permits. And I think that at least one of our friends is going to start construction soon. He's in the process of setting it up. So hopefully we can start construction soon in this project. Anyways, so I'm gonna go really fast in the hours. I know we're getting too long. So this project is a little bit about the border, a competition. We usually don't do competitions, and this competition it was for Arquine, and it was an opportunistic landscape. We talked about how to kind of produce the.
Yes, this is an exercise to again think about the border. So while we're making projects, you know, what is about the border that we think is unique, and you know, you have cities that relate to monuments, or the way that the border has become a physical monument or element in the city, and instead of looking at as well, you know, yes, it's something that it is absolutely harsh and complicated and difficult. But how can we take advantage of it? It's been a lot of that the border can be seen as an infrastructure, but as well, if we think of it as, you know, architecturally, that it is a monument. So we constructed this series of structures, generic structures, in a way that can.
So the idea is, in the end, is that, for instance, the border is not something that is going to go away. It's not something that we need to hide it. But if Champs-Élysées is to Paris, if El Zócalo, Mexico City is to Mexico City, if Central Park to New York, why don't we just accept that this element at the scale of the city, it becomes a space, it becomes an element that identifies the condition of where we are. So we were thinking, just a speculation, that these elements become something that gets proliferated, an approach. These architectural elements, right, these proposals, based on latent necessity, an emerging component that identifies the opportunistic landscape, we call it, where the immigrants and citizens needs to occupy, that we have this negotiation of space, an opportunity that is not hybridization, but a space for dialogue that goes back and revalues the contribution for the collective and create urban infrastructure. So at the end is, how do we really accept it? And it's not going to be just diluted, but how do we work with it? So anyways, this...
And how does it become an opportunity to reverse, you know, the harsh conditions and really make it a civic space, you know, a place that you can actually inhabit and make it part of the lives of the people that are living here.
So that's why even our backyard becomes a part of it that we would like to kind of even incorporate in this sense. So anyway, at the end, what we're trying to say that all these projects, how much does your building weigh? It was about Mr. Fuller in the sense of kind of contesting or asking this kind of question to Norman Foster in the sense of almost environmental side of it, and saying how environmentally conscious is this. And for us, it's not so much that question of the environmental only is part of it, but maybe it's a little bit more the question how civic, or how much your building or your design always questions the civic condition that contributes to society. So for us, a little bit, what are the questions that we need to do to ourselves to ask in the sense of how we instill and how we contribute to civic conditions? How civic is your building, or how the levels of civility that we construct in this building can produce in that? So in that sense, now we're going to go just to the research of the what we did in Rome very quickly.
Super quickly. So we're presenting both projects. So one, the most recent, and then this one 13 years ago at the American Academy, and how it has really influenced our practice. It was the beginning of the practice, you know, this project that when Marcel and I started collaborating. And so there was a really deep interest, and continues to be, how Rome's capacity to reinvent life, how architecture and the physical urban history completely dissolves with the procession of the everyday. So the project was named Trajectories. So it was a way to register these daily, everyday activities that happen in between the trajectory to getting the destination of a monument. No, so it was kind of a celebration of what happens in the in-between, a registration, a process of the registration. So these are a series of walking itineraries that made visible the sequential urban transformation of the city and recognizing the unrecognized spaces. And so the project developed and increased in scale. It started from a trajectory we were living at the American Academy to Trastevere. And then this was the tram number 3 that was interesting for us because it travels from the inside to the outside of the Aurelian Wall and registering in a series of sections that whole trajectory of the city going back and forth. Okay, so now we're going to jump to this time, the last year when I was there, and the project that we started, and the interest that was is about the stairs of Naples, and particularly how the stairs that Ferdinando Sanfelice had an impact in this urban fabric. So as you can see, Naples is a very specific deep urban blocks. They're squeezed together, but interesting how these stairs had an impact in society, an impact in the urban fabric of the city. On the left, you see this Ferdinando Sanfelice's stair, where you have the Palazzo, Sanità 2 and Sanità 6, right? And then you see this sequence. Like many of you know better than me that this is part of your culture, your heritage. It's really important, right? And you know more than this, but this was really important for us to study it. So Ferdinando Sanfelice's stairs that had a very interesting factor, how these two fusions or these two palaces are becoming an interesting way of connecting to the city. So this is Sanità 2, and I took a video, right? I'm just gonna go really quickly, hopefully. I was using videos and drones to capture and understand this. So this is the other stair. I'm just going to show you a little video of that one. Luca, are we okay in time? Or is it too? As you can see, this transformation of the space, right? And suddenly these stairs become super important on the layering of the space. So you can see from here the courtyard, and then the other part of the courtyard in the back. And this space is interesting how at that point, right, in the 16th, 17th century, how they started to kind of transform the palazzo. We'll talk about a little more and explain that. Anyway, so why the stairs? So anyway, I'm just going to quickly. So what is interesting is that in this map of Barata, that he explains in this map a little bit how the structure of the city was being constructed, right? Because you can see, for instance, here how the wall is being contained the city, and for two main reasons where it's being contained. One, because the idea of agriculture to have people outside to maintain the city, and the other one, it was to collect taxes. So this wall was a confinement, a constraint, and the match was to kind of not let the city grow, to maintain it as it is.
So this maintaining in the Spanish ruling when Naples was part of this kind of viceroy of ruling of Naples was a way to control the city. And later on, right, we see the stairs of evolving, but in the sense of how they're evolving. Well, here we see another a map where the city it starts kind of splitting to the outside. So the walls start to kind of dilute itself, and then suddenly the map shows the idea of power in the sense of the Spanish quarter becomes at the center, the old center comes to the side, and also how the new development was in this area here, but it will also start to happen on the outskirts, on the periphery of these areas outside the wall. But in that sense, the big change came when Duca de Noja, right, make the plea to the Viceroy, to Francisco de Toledo, to say how we needed to kind of create a map that registers this growth. So this registration, right, of Duca de Noja in the 18th century was becoming very important to capture these things. So this map is very similar to the Noli map. Many of the people who work for Noli, they came to Duca de Noja maps of like Noli, that captures, like, these are the two stairs of Fernando San Felice, that captures the continuation of this space, almost like saying, yes, this is a continuation of the street, and these are the two stairs that I showed you before. So what I did is try to kind of capture almost 250 stairs, and many of them are inside the wall and also outside, and many start to pop out in the periphery. And they started popping out in the periphery because now the idea of growth, right? The stairs became an opportunity to create illegal settlements, almost the growth illegality in the vertical sense. So the stairs became an opportunity to fuse, separate palazzos, and also to kind of create a bigger density. They're almost hidden between the control of the city. So these stairs, they became almost illegal acts over urbanism. They created the essence of the city. So here in not in Duca, in Federico Schiavoni, now in the 19th century, right, in the late 18th, 19th century, they created this map. And this is, for me, was a great discovery, that how this map really registered the condition of the development of the stairs. So now, not anymore like Duca de Noja, now the stairs are being kind of drawn. Every stair of all the palazzos are being drawn at that scale. So the stair now is, in essence, understood as a continuation of this public space. The density, the idea of strata, of the idea of these palazzos that were not anymore one single family or one for the person, but it's being subdivided, that is being rented. The density is becoming more a density of verticality of the city. So the units are being subdivided, and the stairs becomes an opportunity to create that. So this map captures that. So here you will see the transformation of these palazzos and how the stairs become part of it. For instance, here, another one, that two palazzos were being fused in the connection of it. And here, once again, the Palazzo of Fernando San Felice, and how these stairs are being transformed. So you have the two stairs, which is Ala de Falco and the Scroll Stair. And these two elements became the ingredients or the prototypes that were transformed later on, like these ones in the main street of Toledo, that they were transforming the whole city. So that at the end, all these palazzos started to become an interesting point of how they're dealing with architecture, but how a stair has the impact at the society level, how a stair, the contribution of civic condition that the stair can have at the transformation, an architectural element that the transformation has at the urban scale. So in this case, two quotes that synthesize, in my point of view, this idea of Cesare Zeta, the idea how the thinning or thickening of the buildings and constructing in these kind of negotiating elements, and how Ante de Blount, who one of the first ones who registered and studied the stairs, talks about the complexities and the dexterity that the stair needs to have in order to accomplish these things. So these ideas of between architecture and the relationship of the city. So at the end, we tried to capture all these things. We created a catalog, and this hopefully this catalog has an impact of understanding how we see the cells of the society, how do we see that architecture has an impact in society. Anyways. Thank you. That's our presentation. Hopefully, I didn't want. We talked a lot, but if you have any questions, we will more than gladly participate and answer those.
So really, really thanks, Marcel and Adriana, for this presentation. As usual, I ask the students if they have questions. First of all, I want to do a question. I want to make a question to you. Because what is interesting in your work is what I call the space of freedom. And in each project you have, and it's incredible how this last research that you did in Roma, at the beginning, I still remember when you mentioned to me this story, I said, okay, but I cannot understand what an architect, a group of architects from Tijuana want to go to Roma and to study the stairs of a specific period in Napoli. No? So for me, was really at the beginning was really very strange. But at the end, when you show to me the project and also you show it again today, for me, it's exactly what you try to find in your building. That space, no? And this is quite interesting when you can read in the memory. When you can read in the memory, in the history, but in the memory of architecture, you can read something that you can use to reinvent the contemporary architecture. That doesn't mean that you want to have stairs in your houses, but this space in between is exactly the condition that you try to investigate with the building, with the small experiment of the social housing, with the library. With all this project, you can find this kind of limit between two conditions. So the project that you give to the community, but also the invention that the people of the community can produce with the building itself. In the image that you show today, the most beautiful one is the video of the library with the kids that they running around, no? And they enter in the corner in this kind of cuts in the building that, of course, I think that you produce to create a ventilation, no? Inside the building from all the sides. But this thing that you need to have to produce this natural ventilation inside the building, at the same time, is this space of freedom that also the child can use as a playground. No? So the building is a library, is a community building, but at the same time is a playground for the child. And so this is a consideration of your work. And my question is, how is important the research as a professor for your practice? No? Because, you know, in Italy, when you became a professor, you need to declare if you want to continue to be an architect or not. No? And this is, for me, is a kind of jail. Because, of course, you cannot do teacher all your life. And what is interesting in your work is this kind of relationship. How does the experience in the school and the theoretical research give power to your project?
I think that's fundamental, and I think that's the platform of our practice, that we say that architecture, if you just work in architecture, if you just work on a practice, that is very difficult to have a research side of it. And if you work just in research, it's very difficult to test your ideas or test these things. So we need to kind of always, we always work in this realm, that we have a practice, and we need to have the side of school, academia, to help us develop that research. And to be bluntly, really, in Mexico, nobody will pay you to do research. That's not existent. That's something that nobody will pay you to do research. So yes, we are using the United States. We're working there. We're teaching there to pay us to do research to apply it in Mexico. And then our practice, right? Our practice is to really practice and develop projects here, right? That will inform, and also in a society that is very choked up to young practices to develop or to build anything, that we're saying we can do it here, and we can show you that we can do some practices and doing some stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that the crisis in the United States of the discipline of architecture has allowed us to do both. I think the platform in the United States for teaching and recognizing the incredible challenges that we are facing, they have been extremely supportive on combining practice and academia. I think precisely because of that, and it's not only us, I think other professors that are, dealing with the border, like Teddy Cruz as well, and many others that I think there is a commitment in academia that in order to be able that our work is meaningful in terms of research, we have to be dealing with these projects. We have to get our hands dirty. We have to really test ideas and get out there. So I think the support, the incredible support on being on this area, I think it has been.
But I think that it's interesting because Luca, you're saying that in Italy, we have talked about it, that in Italy it's more like you become a professor and it's almost automatically you cannot have a practice, and it's more like a situation, right? But in the United States, it's almost like economically, right? In the politics of the monopoly, architects in the United States are not they're not forbidden to not practice, but they cannot do it. It's very difficult to have a practice in the United States, and I think that that's something similar you see in academia, that people are just working in installations, working in these conditions, and suddenly the way they want to produce practice is very late in their game. They don't have a way to really test it. Everything becomes insular. And I think that that's where it's really fascinating for us, that being in this border, in a way, right, has given us the opportunity to say, yes, we can have that sense of kind of support and also be able to practice in Tijuana. And now we are coming back, like the houses that we're talking about, coming back to San Diego in order to kind of test these ideas now in the US side, to say, hey, we can do it, we can build it. It's not only from one side, but we can do it also in San Diego. And we're trying to find these loopholes, these kind of ways to kind of also practice in San Diego. And I think that's important also.
Ragazzi, avete qualche domanda? Perché molti progetti che mi avete mostrato oggi in revisione potrebbero trovare una soluzione se avete guardato bene. Poi vi dico come, la settimana prossima vi dico quali sono e perché trovano delle soluzioni al vostro progetto. Ciao Luca.
Ciao.
Ha riconosciuto la tua voce, mi ha chiesto, e l'altro Luca.
Sì, parla con lui. Lui parla benissimo l'italiano, eh?
Giulia, tu vuoi fare qualche domanda?
Io sono arrivata 20 minuti fa. Hi, I apologize for my delay, but I was involved in another lecture in another virtual room. So I'm really sorry, but I listened just a few minutes of your presentation. Mi spiace perché da quello che ho visto mi sarebbe anche interessato, mi sa.
Ti mando la registrazione poi.
Grazie.
Grazie.
One question about the book. Are you working around the book on Napoli, on the research on Napoli, or not?
Lately, no, since I came back, I have not. Hopefully now that I'm going to be with funding from Berkeley and research, hopefully I can start kind of reactivating that and create a book out of it.
We were thinking of fusing the two research together, even though one is in the urban scale, the other is in the architecture scale, but they're both about the transitional spaces. So somehow we want to put that together, like in a way the manifesto of our practice. Yeah.
So hopefully we need to invest time on this, and I think that we can do it next year, hopefully.
Allora, qualche domanda, ragazzi? Avete pensato?
Sì, anche posso fare più un commento di una domanda?
Certo.
Okay. Also, I'll switch to English. I just want to say, thank you so much. I really express my gratitude. I'm originally from the United States. And from the beginning of your guys' presentation, I found it fascinating because I've never seen the wall like that up in person. And so seeing that and then following all your work where I feel like you really made this effort to create architecture as a series of invitations, like invitations for people to interact and create a sense of community. And I feel like a lot of times that's something that is easily overlooked. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for the research that you guys are doing and how you're integrating it into the practice, because I can say from experience in the States that there's a massive gap from my experience from what happens in academia, the ivory tower, and in practice. So thank you for all the examples. It's really appreciated.
Thank you so much for your comment. I agree that yes, we're trying. Yeah, I call it platforms, but yes, it's invitations.
I like it how you call it invitations.
I like invitations. So yes, I like that. I think that once where we're talking about is, as architects, we create a series of, we don't know what is going to be the outcome, and we don't want to know at the end what is the total outcome. I don't think we are, but we would like to say, well, there's moments here for you to create these things. We want to create opportunities. So this invitation, in some way, yes, there are ways of creating opportunities, and sometimes we get it wrong. We thought they were going to be explored in other ways, and sometimes they are being used in other things. But I think that's not to say that, oh yes, we're hands-off architects. No, we are hands-on, but we create opportunities and invitations for that. And I think the more the more we practice and create this kind of architecture, we need to understand the different social groups and different characteristics of people that become part of it, and how to kind of become more engaged in this process, and in how to kind of produce with other people. So the invitations it's not only about the invitation. What I'm trying to say is not only the invitation of how people engage in the building, but invitation of collaborations, invitation how do you manage these productions of saying we need to collaborate.
Allora, grazie. Ci vediamo presto in Italia, and so you have the possibility to come back to Ascoli. You know, Giulia, Adriana, she was a student of Cristiano in Ascoli long time ago. I don't want to say when, because but she was in Ascoli as a Cristiano student some time ago.
Yeah.
For sure, we will organize a beautiful party in next spring with a festival of architecture in Ascoli.
Yeah, I would love to.
Love it.
Yeah, I would love it. We're as you know, we used to go every year, and we used to go every summer, right? Every year to Italy. And this is the first time we are not going, and we feel like something's really missing. Something's really missing. So we're eager to come back. We'll hopefully, when this comes out, we're eager to come back.
I would love to be in Ascoli.
Ok. Bene.
Grazie davvero di essere stati con noi oggi. Un saluto a tutti quanti. Specialmente a Luca e Bruno, ok? Che mi piace questa cosa che in lockdown loro fanno parte della conferenza.
Grazie.
Ciao, grazie.
Grazie mille.
Ci vediamo presto.
Grazie
A presto.
mille.
Ciao, grazie.
Ciao. Grazie.